prototype is not a villain, because before it became the most dangerous thing in the entire factory, it was just a child. A child who had nothing, no family, no one, and he ended up becoming the worst mistake Playtime Co. ever created. But this story doesn't start with a monster, it starts with a father, Elliot Ludwig. In 1976, Elliot created an orphanage inside his own company. Not to help children, but for something much darker. And it was there that he found Oliver, the boy who would change everything. Oliver was not a normal child. From a very young age, he had lived through constant abuse, beatings, mistreatments, and even attacks so brutal they reached the point of hitting him with a hammer. Yes, a hammer! His body was already broken, but his mind wasn't. Because, despite all of that, Oliver was extremely intelligent, and that was what caught Elliot's attention. He didn't see him as a son, he saw him as an opportunity. That's why he decided to adopt him. And in Oliver's mind, that meant everything. For the first time, someone had chosen him. For the first time, he had what he always wanted. A family. But what Oliver didn't know was that this family already had a plan for him. Because Elliot never stopped thinking about his daughter. He never stopped searching for a way to bring her back. And when he discovered the so-called Poppy gel, everything changed. Elliot was convinced that substance could bring the dead back to life. But there was a problem. He needed to test it first. He needed a boy. And Oliver was perfect. What happened next was no longer adoption. It was betrayal. Elliot took Oliver to a hidden laboratory inside the factory, a cold place where no one could see him. And that's where it all began. Elliot started experimenting on his body. It wasn't fast and it wasn't clean. It was slow and brutal. He tore pieces out of him, muscle, organs, and even his nervous system, all to adapt him into something that wasn't human, a mechanical body. While doing all of that, Elliot used the Poppy gel. He injected it over and over again, trying to force life into that new body. And against all odds, it worked. Oliver didn't die. He became something else. A being that didn't need to eat, or drink, or sleep. A being that could no longer die. The prototype had been born. But the problem wasn't the experiment. It was what came after. Because the moment Oliver understood what they did to him, he realized something worse. He was never a son. He was just a tool. After that, Oliver never looked at Elliot the same way again. Because while he was trying to understand what he had become, Elliot was already thinking about what came next. His daughter. Because none of this was ever for Oliver. It was always for her. It didn't take long for Elliot to succeed. Using the same process, the same experiment, Elliot brought his daughter back inside the body of a doll, Poppy. And this is where everything breaks, because Elliot didn't treat them the same. He saw Poppy as his real daughter. He cared for her, protected her, loved her. But Oliver was just the first attempt, the experiment that worked, and that changed everything. Because as more time passed, it became clearer and clearer, Oliver hadn't been saved, he had been replaced. Over time, that resentment stopped being just an idea. It became something else, something Oliver could no longer control. Because while Elliot continued with his life as if nothing had happened, Oliver kept planning his revenge. Until the day came. In 1989, a catastrophe occurred. The prototype managed to escape his confinement, and that same day, Elliot was found dead in his office with stab wounds. The wounds matched the prototype's fingers. It was never officially confirmed, but inside the factory, everyone knew. After that, there was no turning back. The prototype hadn't just escaped. Now it had a goal: to get out of the factory. And to achieve that, it started moving where no one could see it. The vents, the shadows, the forgotten corners. That's where he developed something that made him even more dangerous. He could mimic voices, copy the voice of a child or any employee, and it didn't take long for him to use it. This was no longer Oliver. This was something completely different. Something that was already learning how to use others. And it didn't take long before he started using that ability, because he found someone perfect. Theodore Gramble, a child barely 7 years old. The prototype approached him, pretending to be a friend he could trust. But it was all a lie. He was just using him. He convinced him to steal a grab pack and a green hand. With that, they could open doors, escape. But nothing went the way he expected. Theodore made a mistake. He overloaded the hand and ended up getting electrocuted, left on the verge of dead. And this is where everything gets strange, because the prototype had a choice. He could have let him die and escaped, but he didn't. He came out of hiding, he took him, and he brought him to the company's doctors to save him. But this cost him, because by doing that, he revealed his position, and that's how he was captured again. But this confinement didn't stop him. In 1990, the prototype tried again. Only this time, he was smarter. He used parts from an alarm clock to create a laser pointer. With that, he managed to disable a security camera for a few seconds, just enough time to hide in a blind spot. An employee walked in to check, and in an instant, the prototype killed her. At this point, he wasn't just someone trying to escape anymore. Now, he was someone willing to kill to achieve it. That same year, someone else arrived at the company. Dr. Harley Sawyer, a brilliant and dangerous neurosurgeon, because his ideas were gonna change everything. Dr. Harley Sawyer didn't come to improve the factory. He came to take everything much further. His idea was simple. If the prototype worked, they could replicate it, but on a larger scale. That's how the bigger bodies were born. Experiments where they took the company's most important characters and gave them life. But to achieve that, they needed the same thing as before: children. And the prototype saw everything. He saw how they were doing exactly the same thing they did to him, but now to many more. And that's what finally broke him, because they weren't just using him as an experiment. Now they were using other children too. One of them was Theodore, the same child he saved. They took him, they tortured him, and they turned him into something else: catnap. But something went wrong, because in the middle of all of that pain, Theodore didn't forget the prototype. He started seeing him as something higher, almost like a god. That only made everything more dangerous. After all that, the situation inside the factory only got worse. In 1993, another disaster happened. A fire in the company's theater, a place where they showed these experiments to visitors. Everything went out of control. The toys attacked and 66 people died. The one directly responsible was Dr. Harley. He was blamed for negligence. But what happened next was worse, because the company did to him the same thing he did to others. They turned him into an experiment, a living computer connected to the factory. And the prototype saw it as justice. At that point, his goal was no longer just to escape. It had completely changed. Now he wanted something more. He wanted revenge. By 1995, everything was ready. The prototype stopped thinking about escaping. Now he wanted control. All that time he had been moving in the shadows, talking to other toys, convincing them, forming alliances. One of the most important was Preston, a company employee, a biologist in charge of observing the toys. Preston had seen everything: the The experiments, the torture, the children turned into toys. And because of that, he didn't see the prototype as a monster. He saw him as a victim. So he decided to help him. The plan had a name: the Hour of Joy. According to the prototype, it'll be an escape. Free everyone so they could leave the factory. But it wasn't that. It never was. On August 8, 1995, Preston opened the doors and everything began. The toys attacked without control. Employees, visitors, innocent people, everyone was killed. The factory fell that day, and from the outside, it was left abandoned. But inside, it already had a new owner, the prototype. But something worse began. The bodies were dragged into the depths. They were used as food for years. But the orphans were not killed. They were taken to the laboratories. They were still alive. The prototype no longer just wanted control. He also wanted to keep experimenting. And not everyone agreed. Poppy, Dog Day, and other toys. They didn't know anything about the massacre. And when they understood what was happening, they decided to stop him. A rebellion began. But it wasn't enough. The prototype won. He locked Poppy inside a case and forced the other to hide just to survive. At that point, the factory was no longer an abandoned place. It was a domain, and the prototype was the one in control. Years later, everything would change. In 2005, a former employee receives a letter. Someone tells him there are still survivors inside the factory, and he decides to return. That's where everything begins. The moment we enter, player. From the very beginning, one thing is clear. The prototype is still there, watching and waiting. In Chapter 1, we face Huggy Wuggy, the factory security system. But we manage to escape and we free Poppy. And that's the prototype didn't like. In Chapter 2, everything becomes clearer. After defeating Mommy Longlegs, the prototype appears and takes her remains. Not by accident, but because he needs them. From the start, his goal has been the same: to get out of the factory. But he can't do it like this. He needs a better body, stronger, more complete. And that's where we come in. Because as we move forward, the prototype is using us. He lets us advance, fight, and eliminate his enemies so he can take their parts and become stronger. That's his main plan. But there's something else, a plan B, to turn us into his vessel and use us as the perfect body so he can finally get out. And if that happens, the factory won't be the problem anymore. It'll be what's outside. And that was the story of the prototype, a child who never wanted to become a monster. Now, the question is he really the villain or just a result of everything they did to him? We'll read you in the comments. And if you liked the video, subscribe, because this is only the beginning. See you in the next one.